The door is already closing behind you when you realize how little light is left. Outside, the winter sky has narrowed to a pale band above the fields. Inside, the room's darker than you expected. There is a fire, but it does not fill the house with the soft, even warmth of a modern heater. It is one bright, smoky center in a much colder space. Your eyes need a moment to adjust. Your hands do not. They are cold immediately. And before morning, you are going to discover that surviving this night depends less on toughness than on a dozen small decisions you do not yet know how to make. The first problem is the fire. It looks comforting. It is not enough. Stand too far away and the cold returns. Stand too close and your face grows hot while your back remains chilled. The room itself never becomes the uniformly warm indoor space a modern visitor expects. The second problem is darkness. Within the hour, most of the room will disappear beyond the reach of useful light. And the third problem will arrive much later, when the fire is lower, the house is colder, and you wake without knowing whether midnight passed 1 hour ago or 4. For now, though, you have arrived at the worst possible time to be unprepared, just before dark. Imagine a modest village household in Western Europe during the later Middle Ages. This is not one exact family, and not one precisely documented winter night. It is a careful reconstruction built from recurring materials, household practices, seasonal imagery, surviving buildings, and the practical limits that shaped ordinary life. Almost every modern convenience you would normally use to escape the cold is missing. No thermostat. No insulated window. No hot shower waiting upstairs. No electric light to stretch the evening. No refrigerator stocked with prepared food. No microwave to warm a meal in 3 minutes. Comfort has to be assembled slowly from wool, wood, food, shelter, other people, and decisions made before daylight disappears. The first of those decisions begins at the threshold. Your footwear is wet with mud. The floor inside may be beaten earth, boards, or another simple surface depending on the house. Whatever the surface, carrying more damp across it is a bad idea. You scrape away the worst of the mud before moving farther inside. The room is practical rather than empty. A bench, a wooden chest, woven baskets, earthenware, tools, a large cooking vessel near the hearth. Objects are arranged around work because winter does not stop work. It only shortens the hours in which some jobs are easy to do. You move toward the fire. For the first few minutes, it feels like rescue. Then you notice the smoke. Domestic buildings varied enormously across medieval Europe. Some managed smoke better than others. Some had chimneys or more effective smoke control. Others relied on arrangements that would feel far rougher to a modern visitor. What matters here is simple. Fire requires fuel, airflow, attention, and tolerance for the smells and irritations that modern central heating mostly removes from daily life. The householder shifts the pot. A small movement, but it reveals something important. One fire may be cooking your meal, warming hands, drying damp material, providing light, and helping keep one part of the room tolerable at the same time. This is why the fire is not simply heat. It is infrastructure. And it is expensive infrastructure, because every useful flame consumes fuel that someone had to gather, cut, carry, store, or buy. That work began long before tonight. Winter preparation belongs to the rest of the year. Fuel had to be secured. Grain and other foods had to be stored. Some foods could be dried, salted, smoked, or otherwise preserved. Animals required fodder through the cold season, and households could not necessarily carry every animal through winter. Medieval seasonal imagery often places livestock slaughter in the late autumn and early winter cycle, when meat could also be preserved for later use. None of this means an ordinary household ate generously all winter. Region, status, harvest quality, household resources, and simple luck mattered. The later part of the cold season could become lean. Tonight's meal is not a feast. That is one of the easiest things to get wrong when imagining the Middle Ages. Banquets survive in art and literature because banquets were memorable. Ordinary survival was usually less decorative. The pot may contain a dish built around grain, legumes, vegetables, or whatever this household can reasonably use. Bread matters. Preserved food matters. Exact ingredients change with place and wealth, but the governing logic is familiar. The meal must be filling, practical, and compatible with a household that cannot casually waste fuel. You wait for it to warm. Waiting is a larger part of this world than you expected. Modern life removes waiting from cold. Press a button and a room changes. Here, wood must catch. Water must heat. Food must cook. Damp cloth must dry gradually. And darkness arrives whether the work is finished or not. The window has become a weak rectangle. A few minutes ago you could still make out the yard beyond it. Now the exterior has become mostly shape and contrast. Someone across the room is still visible, then less visible, then a figure defined by firelight. This is where the second problem becomes real. You are losing usable light. Daylight matters because artificial light costs something too. Firelight is useful but uneven. Tallow candles could smell and require care. Beeswax candles were generally more expensive. Oil lamps existed in some contexts. None of these transforms a modest household into a bright modern interior. So the evening contracts. Tasks drift toward the hearth. Hands work where light exists. Objects left near a wall disappear into shadow. The house has not become smaller, but the useful part of it has. By now, the meal is ready enough to eat. Warm food helps. For a while. That brief relief explains the logic of the entire evening. Medieval winter survival is not one heroic solution. It is a chain of small advantages. Eat something warm. Keep clothing dry. Stay out of the wind. Preserve fuel. Close openings where possible. Keep insulating layers around the body. Finish important outdoor work before darkness makes it harder. Break enough links in that chain, and the night becomes much more difficult. Your clothing is one of the strongest links. The material that matters most here is not a secret medieval technology. It is wool. Wool can trap insulating air, can be layered, and remains useful under conditions that would make a thin modern cotton shirt miserable. Linen has its place too, especially closer to the skin, but winter comfort depends heavily on layers and on keeping those layers as dry as possible. The modern expectation that an indoor room should be warm enough for light clothing does not apply. Your clothing comes indoors with you. A hood or cap, a wool outer layer, a tunic, leg coverings, footwear, blankets. Whatever this particular household can afford, maintain, and keep reasonably dry. A building can protect you from wind and precipitation without becoming warm in the modern sense. That distinction is easy to miss when looking at a painting of a fire. A fire looks warm. A house with one fire is not necessarily warm. Someone steps away from the hearth to fetch an object from the edge of the room. Their face disappears first, then their clothing, until the movement is mostly a silhouette. When they return, the firelight rebuilds them. Outside, the village is now almost completely dark. There is no continuous orange glow above the horizon. No headlights. No bright windows lining the road. A few points of fire or lamplight may exist, but night is allowed to be night. And sound changes with it. Earlier you heard the end of work. Feet, tools, voices, animals, doors. Now those sounds separate from one another. A latch. A dog. Wind against a loose surface. Perhaps an animal shifting close enough to the household to be heard but not clearly seen. You begin thinking about sleep. This is where the title of the episode becomes unfairly personal. The medieval solution to a winter night is almost the opposite of what a modern visitor expects from comfort. A colder room, less privacy, heavier clothing, more darkness, and far less control over the temperature. A bed is not automatically a private room. Privacy depends on wealth, architecture, household size, and circumstance. Bedding itself is valuable. Simple bedding could take several forms, including straw-filled arrangements, mattresses of different kinds, blankets, coverings, and, in wealthier contexts, curtains or more elaborate beds. Together, these could create a smaller protected environment around the sleeper. The bed is another climate system. The goal is not to heat the entire building. The goal is to keep a much smaller pocket around the body tolerable enough for rest. You prepare for sleep while still wearing more clothing than you would at home. At first, this feels wrong. Modern bedrooms train you to let the room carry much of the thermal burden. Here, clothing and bedding carry more of it. Before anyone lies down, the household performs a final sequence of ordinary tasks. Anything still needed for the night is brought within reach. Something damp is moved to a better place to dry. The door is secured. Fuel is checked. The cooking area is made safer. Nothing about this looks cinematic. That is exactly the point. The night is being made survivable through maintenance. The fire will not remain a perfect orange source of warmth until morning. Fuel represents labor and resources. An unattended fire also carries obvious risks. The household balances warmth against fuel and safety. So the fire is allowed to fall. The room will become colder. You know this before you lie down. And then the house settles. For a while, you are too alert to sleep. The darkness is dense enough that your ears begin rebuilding the room from sound. A small movement seems larger because you cannot see its cause. Smoke has settled into the smell of cloth and timber. The air beyond the bedding feels noticeably colder than the air inside it. Then something unexpected happens. The darkness begins to feel less like an absence and more like a boundary. There's less to look at. Less work can continue. The village is not asking you to remain productive until midnight under bright artificial light. The day has narrowed to shelter, warmth, food, and rest. This does not make medieval winter comfortable. It makes the logic of the household easier to see. Every object around you has a reason to be where it is. The basket is there because something had to be carried before dark. The pot is there because one fire must do several jobs. The wool is there because the room cannot be trusted to stay warm. Stored food is there because winter preparation began months before this night. The chest keeps valuable material together and protected. The darkness is there because light itself is a resource. And the people around you are part of the system too. A modern image of comfort often emphasizes space and privacy. A pre-modern winter household could gain practical advantages from proximity. Bodies produce heat. Shared activity could reduce the number of separate spaces requiring fuel and light. Work, food, conversation, and rest might overlap physically because heating a large collection of separate rooms would demand far more energy. You may not enjoy the closeness, but now you understand why it exists. Somewhere in the middle of the night, you wait. There is no illuminated clock beside the bed. You do not know whether you have slept for 1 hour or 4. The fire is lower. The room has changed temperature. Most of what remains visible comes from embers, and whatever faint outside light reaches an opening. This is the third problem promised at the beginning. The fire is no longer enough even to create the illusion that the whole room is warm. Your feet are cold. Your nose is cold. The idea of leaving the bedding feels unreasonable. And yet this is the moment when every small decision made before sunset finally reveals its value. Dry wool matters. Enough bedding matters. Shelter from wind matters. Fuel management matters. Eating before sleep matters. Finishing outdoor work before darkness matters. keeping important objects where they can be found in weak light matters. No single one of these choices conquered winter. Together, they made the night manageable. That is the most useful correction to the usual picture of medieval life. People did not survive difficult winters because they were somehow naturally tougher than modern people. They survived because generations of ordinary practice were built around constraints that modern technology has mostly removed from daily attention. They knew what had to happen before sunset. They knew which foods had to last. They knew what materials kept warmth close. They knew how much darkness changed work. They knew that a house did not need to feel like summer in order to keep a household alive. Eventually, the night begins to loosen. At first, there is no sunrise, only a slight difference in the darkness near an opening. The room slowly regains edges. A chest becomes a chest again, instead of a black rectangle. The hearth returns as a shape. A blanket becomes wool instead of shadow. Someone else begins moving before you are ready to move. Morning does not arrive with comfort. It arrives with work. The fire needs attention. Water needs carrying. Animals need checking. Food needs preparing. Winter has shortened the day, but it has not removed the household's obligations. You sit up. You did, in fact, make it through the winter night, but only because the people around you had already turned generations of experience into routine. Without that knowledge, the title would have been much less forgiving. And after one night in their house, the most surprising thing is no longer how cold the medieval world could be. It is how much intelligence was hidden inside the ordinary act of staying warm until morning.